Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're choosing to listen live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them, we recommend even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words, Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we will address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just so much easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. If you are choosing to join us through Zoom, all you have to do is use one of the many phone numbers that Zoom makes available, or open a Zoom window, and our meeting ID number on Zoom is 853-2357-4173. 853-2357-4173. And if you come on the Zoom call, we'd appreciate it if you mute, unless you have something specific you would like to add, or a comment or a question you'd like to make, and then remain muted to minimize background noise. And at any point in time, even if it seems like I'm reading something or in the middle of reading something, we encourage people to raise a hand, make a comment, type something in the chat. and we'll address it because those contributions of yours are always valued and always seen as an addition to this work. So here we are on a Tuesday, and I had the pleasure this morning of interviewing Micah Salabarios, who is the author of The Art of Nonviolent Communication. And if all goes well, a week from today, 2 weeks from today, there'll be a published podcast on the On Your Mind podcast, where I interviewed Micah Salabarios, who's the author of The Art of Nonviolent Communication. And you might have heard me talk about that on here. It's a book I highly recommend to people. It's only an hour-long audio if you get it through Audible. It's only about a $4 or $5 investment. And it is the best, concise, thorough, and nicely written summary of nonviolent communication I've ever encountered. And I highly recommend that, just like I highly recommend the Imago dialogue from Harville Hendrix, and I recommend the Michael Rice's responsibility communication tool, and I recommend the Robert Bolton's reflective listening from his book People Skills, because to me, my eye and ear, all of these are giving the same basic steps for effective communication. And most of them, if not all of them, also offer a different goal for communicating. Instead of I'm trying to prove I'm right and somebody else is wrong, or I'm trying to establish dominance, or I'm trying to fawn in front of somebody. Most of these communication tools set as the goal, I want to connect. I want to make sure that the intention I have in my mind matches the impact that's received in the mind of another. And when that happens, it creates a sense of connection, a sense of intimacy, a sense of safety. And if that's the intention for a communication, then I highly recommend that you find one of these four or your own. Perhaps there are many other different ones out there. If I could find four in my short lifetime, I'm sure there are a number of others that are very similar and maybe use slightly different words, slightly different format, helping people achieve the goal of connecting and giving your partner the gift of feeling heard and understood. And he let me know, Micah Salabarios let me know this morning that he's near the end of finishing a second book. He self-published The Art of Nonviolent Communication, and now he's had a publisher pick him up, and they want him to write the book on the art of emergency empathy, which is one of the 5 steps of the nonviolent communication process that he outlines. So I look forward to that. I look forward to publishing this interview. I look forward to your questions and comments about it, and or your recommendations of other people you think I should interview. I was making some notes about various things that I'm listening to between sessions, and one of the notes I made from Dr. Michael Rice's it was a week ago Monday and a week ago today, his 2 shows where he was doing a review of his workshop on the names of God from the Course in Miracles lessons of the same title. And one of them was the quote about and this is from the Course in Miracles, it says, when I exempt anyone from my love, from extending love in my interactions with them and my thoughts about them, etc., when I exempt anyone from my loving energy and my loving thoughts, it means I am hiding a darkened, or I would say a wounded place within my own mind where, when I refuse to extend love to another person, I'm refusing the Holy Spirit's healing power for myself in that part of my mind. So whatever my thoughts are that would lead me to think this person is X, Y, or Z, a jerk, a negative, wrong here, etc., and they deserve punishment, what's actually happening there is I'm getting shown a part of my own mind, and whatever my mind is telling me in that moment about why I'm upset, it's not the whole truth. If there's any part of it that's true, most of it's false, or it's built on a false premise. And it might be completely false. But if my mind is trying to tell me that I'm upset because somebody else did X, Y, or Z, it's not the truth that my mind is telling me. The real truth is that, and this is from one of the bottom line observations that says, I'll never be upset about anything anybody else ever says or doesn't do that I think they should, unless I'm still judging myself negatively for doing the same or similar thing. And for anybody who's been fully honest in one of my sessions where it's come up that they believe they're upset about what somebody else is doing or has done, and I bring this awareness in front of them, that bottom line observation, and I ask them to think about how they might be holding negative judgments against themselves for doing the same or similar thing that their mind is currently telling them they're upset with X, Y, or Z person outside of them for doing. Every time I've had somebody who's honest, willing to be that honest in my office, they see it. And it happened again just this morning in the session I was having right before this call. A person is going on and on about his upset, ostensibly about somebody outside of him. And I said to him, well, what we know from this work is that the the upset you're experiencing right now is because you still hold parts of your mind where you're holding on to negative judgments against yourself for living your life in exactly the same way that this person is living her life. And he said, I know it. I know it. I hate that. If I have the willingness to be honest, I find every time I question this for myself, every time I do enough worksheets on it for myself, I find that the driving force, if not the only reason I have upset in my mind when I think about somebody else, is because I'm still judging myself negatively for doing whatever it is I think they're doing that they shouldn't be doing. And if I'm willing to look at that, if I'm willing to dismantle my negative judgments against myself, what happens in the next moment is I open to compassion for my younger self. And by younger, it might mean 2 weeks ago. It doesn't have to be 30 or 50 years ago. But when I see, as Guy Finley would say in his words, when I finally come to see that I can't stop myself from doing the very thing I think I'm upset with that person for doing, that's what opens compassion. It opens the door and compassion floods in. I am never upset for the reason I think I am. Course in Miracles. I will only, always, and forever be upset because I'm still holding negative judgments against myself for whatever my mind is telling me this person outside of me is doing. I'm never upset about what anybody else is doing, unless I'm still holding an upset within myself, negative judgments against myself for doing the same or similar thing. And when I dismantle that judgment, it opens the doorway for compassion to myself at that earlier time in my life, whether it was 2 weeks ago or 40 years ago. And when I'm willing to step into this acceptance of self through the compassionate lens, then when I open my eyes and look at this other person in real time today that minutes ago I thought I was upset because they did this, that, or the other thing, I will only have compassion for that person. So just some thoughts that have been top of mind this morning and in the previous session. And I welcome comments. I welcome questions. If you're already online, all you have to do is unmute and speak up.
Hello, Dr. Tim. This is Susan Bingham here.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm speaking up. I can't wait to hear that interview you did with Salabarios. Something came up just this morning which fits perfectly, and I was not equipped. I didn't do anything wrong. I just felt that tightening of not feeling as if I wasn't safe. I was talking to the father of one of my coworkers at the refugee center, and I had just met him, came to visit her. I asked him what his life work was, and he said he is a pastor. And I asked him what church, and he told me something that sounded more conservative or evangelical. And I said, I have a question for you. Basically, I shouldn't have gone there, because what I was doing was, I just realized as I was settling in for this radio show, as I was going into the battlefield with the cult that I belonged to years ago, where they told me they had the truth and everybody else was going to hell. They didn't adopt their truth. I told him about my grandson, who has become an evangelical fundamentalist Christian, and he's very worried about the state of my soul, because if I don't take Jesus as my only savior and the savior of the world, and he died for my sins and the whole thing, then I'm going to go to hell, no matter what I do in my life or what my intentions are. And the guy he's a lovely man, smart. He started telling me, well, it's all in scripture. It's all in the Bible. Jesus is the way. And I thought, oh no, here I am. I could have used knowing how to have nonviolent communication right then. We got partway into, I told him I had studied a different religion and found that there were incredible holy people in that tradition. And he said, that may be, but, and he went into basically his what I felt was violent communication. That's my interpretation. He was trying to win me over to the truth.
As he sees it, yes, absolutely.
As he sees it, yep. And I could interpret that.
And you were trying to win him over to yours.
Absolutely.
And therein lies the root of the violence.
Right, exactly. So I could use a few lessons. Probably ought to get that book. I know you said
it's only an hour. It's only an hour Audible, which is one of the reasons I recommend it so strongly to people, because you can listen again and again and again and start to craft the template for your own thought process around the very same kinds of things that Dr. Micah Ryce has in his responsibility communication, and it's the very same thing that I believe is in Harville Hendrix's Imago dialogue and in Robert Bolton's People Skills, Reflective Listening. It's all solid stuff that's based on respect and the desire to make a connection rather than the desire to prove one person right and the other one wrong.
Right. And it occurs to me that to learn how to have nonviolent communication, you actually have to approach everything with allowing and a feeling of being okay in yourself before you even start. You didn't mention that, but I was thinking that would be a prerequisite for me to go in to speak to this guy. I was not well prepared. I know, I do know what I think, but I'm ready to have somebody upend it or try to upend it. I feel under threat. So in a way, this book is kind of like preparing us, making us healthy enough to have a good conversation with someone.
Well, remember, in the kind of communication or interaction, I wouldn't even call it a communication, the kind of interaction you were having with this gentleman, it didn't share the intention that we're recommending, right? Like, I remember in one of the earlier versions of either the relationship, healing through relationship.
Yeah.
That's the title of Michael Ryce's workshop. And he used to call it, for a brief period when he first got into this, he would call it healing your relationship. And then he woke up and realized that there's no such thing as a broken relationship. It's healing yourself through the process of relationship if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, good.
Well, in one of the earlier ones with one of his former wives, Michael Ryce and his wife near the end of it said, and this is on a video of the workshop, they said, most people get into relationships and the goals they are holding are, we want to accumulate stuff and we want to prove who's right and who's wrong. And those are the two primary goals in a relationship. And they said, we're going to offer you a new goal to set for your own relationship. And that new goal is, I want to heal.
Right. That's wonderful.
And if I'm going into anything, I don't care whether you call it nonviolent communication or respectful communication or whatever. If I'm going into it because I want to prove I'm right and the other person's wrong, it's not truly communication.
That's true.
Right? It's either coercion or it's manipulation or it's beating up on each other. The goal that Dr. Marshall Rosenberg talks about in his more thorough books and Dr. Ryce talks about in some of his workshops is that we communicate to heal. We communicate to connect. We communicate for intimacy. And if I want to increase the intimacy in my relationship, and that's why I'm saying words and doing actions, I'm going to get an entirely different end result than if I want to prove I'm right and the other person's wrong. And so you began this interaction with this man this morning from the second position. You wanted to prove who's right and who's wrong. And or you wanted him to help you demonstrate what you already believed to be true. And then maybe he could help you communicate that to your grandson. But the bottom line is, it wasn't about you had a strong desire to connect intimately with this man.
That is true, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but that's true. Since he came across in such a wonderful way, I thought he would give me a sentence or two that I could use with my grandson to convince him that he doesn't have to worry about the state of my soul. Whatever it isn't for him to worry about, and that Jesus is bigger than the Jesus that he's teaching, trying to get across to me. But I guess I still think I could be wrong. I admire people who are so sure. My minister, when I was in that cult, was positive. He was sure. Charlie is sure. This man is sure. I don't know what to do with people who are sure. I don't think I'll ever be sure.
And
But
and why do you feel like you need to do something with them?
to get safe, I don't realize that I'm
There you
already
go.
safe.
There you go. And there's your worksheets.
Okay.
You're feeling threatened. You're not feeling safe. Cancel the goal to feel safe and ask to be shown the hidden part of your mind that's connected to the thoughts that you're
Mm,
using to generate the feeling of not being safe and the emotion of fear or
okay.
terror or whatever you say. And when
Mm,
you do that, your mind will offer you, if you do it enough, if you're willing enough, and you keep repeating the action and the words that tell your mind, I really do want to see what's hidden in the fearful part of my own mind, your mind will eventually share with you what you're so afraid of,
well,
what is truly generating the fear.
you gave me a sentence completion thing for my sister that was very effective. It took a while, but it was. I'd love to have something like that for this. If something pops to your mind.
Well, say more about that. This meaning this fear you have, how would you formulate the fear? How would you state to me that you have a fear related to your grandson thinking that you're not going to be saved?
My fear is that he might be right.
You
And
have
yet
a fear that he might be right about what?
that I'm going to hell if I don't state with utter conviction that Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven.
Okay. Well,
That's
let me just sit with that for a minute, because at another level, I've formed the impression through the years of my communication with you through this internet show
Mm.
that there's an intellectual part of you that knows better than that. And yet there's a very real, emotionally based part of you that generates fear around that.
I think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the mind shifter that might be most useful, I mean, just one of the many, not the most useful, but one of the many mind shifters that might be useful here is it's safe and healing for me to see the part of my mind that doubts what another part of me knows.
Oh, wow. It is safe and healing for me to see the part of my mind that doubts what another part of me knows. I could certainly use that.
And I worded it that way because I'm saying to see the part of my mind
Mm.
that doubts what another part of me, not my mind, knows. So the mind in this case is the intellectual, it's what we think of as the logical. Does that make sense?
Can you say that last
So,
sentence again?
so the idea is I'm not saying I specifically chose those words to separate out my intellectual mind from
Yeah.
this other part of me.
Mm-hmm.
What's the other part of me? Well, you can give it a lot of different names. You can give it your insight, your intuition, your gut feeling, your connection to spirit, whatever. You can call it all kinds of things. You can call it your unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is distinctly different from your intellect. How do we know that? Well, because it's arguing with your intellect.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Another way to go at it in a mind shifter is it's safe and healing for me to see the darkest fears I hold. To have direct connection to the darkest fears I hold in my mind.
Okay. Hmm. That's good too. I have a friend who admitted that she was an agnostic, and I shot back to her, well, I am too. What's the big deal? Isn't everybody really at the base of it all? And she said, but you go to church and stuff. I said, yeah, it's because I'm trying to find my way to a kind of certainty that I don't know if I'll ever have while I am a separate human on the planet. Uh, well, I've taken us down a down a path that.
But it's all the same path, right? It's all of the thing about how if I'm generating a negative emotional state, even a positive one, if I'm experiencing an emotion, it's my own creation. And this is the core of this work. How can I become aware of what I have control over in this world that might change my experience of life for the better? I was having one of those deep experiences this morning in my regular morning routine that's directly related to this. I forget what it was I was listening to, or it might have been Michael's show from yesterday. It might have been preparing for in my interview with Micah Salabarios this morning. But I had this kind of a felt sense shift within me about everything I do to try and communicate something to somebody else or change somebody else or judge the world as it's unfolding as wrong. Everything I do in that area is going to carry ripple effects that I'm not so satisfied with, right? It's going to come back to me in ways that are not as satisfying. But if I just zero in on what's the one thing I have absolute dominion over, where I choose to focus my mind energy. And then I married that, or it got married in my mind this morning with this one of my favorite comments from Abraham. And one of my favorite comments from Abraham is that you, as a creative being, your most important creation in every moment is your emotion in that moment. Now, why would that be so important? Because this is your contribution to the quantum soup. This is your contribution to the energy that connects us all.
Yes.
Right? We've talked before about how I visualize it as there's this cosmic fire hydrant that is the source of creative energy. And every human being that comes into physical form is given a bit of a hose that's connected to that hydrant, and it's always on. There's no on-off switch at the end of the hose. The only thing we can do as human beings is decide, do we point it over here towards loving energy or towards angry energy or towards fearful energy? And we are given dominion over where we point that hose. And wherever we point it, it's going to create more of whatever we point it at. And so fundamentally, at perhaps the most important level, at this deep philosophical truth, fundamentally, the most important thing I can do in every moment is pay attention to what I'm creating in my emotional state that's radiating out from me and adding to the quantum soup. It's affecting positively or negatively everybody and everything that I interact with. Now, some people say, oh, well, I thought you said that, everybody can create their own. And I do. I do say that. I do have that experience. I believe that these teachings that say, I can be okay even if everybody around me is raging, right? And I can experience their energy of raging. The error that most of us make is I say, oh, I feel you raging and that's why I got defensive, or I feel you raging and that's why I'm sad, or I feel you raging at me and that's why I'm angry at you. And I used to use this example for people that say, look, you can be aware of someone else's emotions. And at the same time, you can be exempt from having their emotions change your emotion, and their emotions are never creating your emotion. They said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, think of it this way. Let's say I leave my office after work today, and I'm going to ride my bike directly south of here to the next town down, Elgin. And there is a wind from the south at 5 or 10 miles an hour. And I leave my office and I end up 20 miles to the northwest, and I blame it on the wind. Did the wind make me end up where I am? No. Is the wind a real thing? Yes. Can I experience the wind? Yes, I can feel it on my face. Is it going to make it harder for me to get there when I'm pedaling directly into the wind? Yes, it's going to take more energy. But is it causing me to change my direction or to not end up where I want to be? No. And that's the example I use for people to say, look, I can walk into a room full of angry or fearful people, and if I generate an emotion in response to that, that's my creation. They didn't cause it. They aren't contributing to it. I'm creating it. And I'm using my awareness of what they're creating as an we could call it an excuse or a rationalization, but the fact of the matter is I create my experience. I could just as easily walk into a room of angry people and generate compassion because they clearly can't be happy at the same time they're angry.
Right. Guess what, Dr. Tim?
All right, what?
I haven't heard from this grandson in weeks, and he just tried to call me while I was listening to you talk. This is the fundamentalist grandson. Just thought that was a nice little touch.
Yes, energy resonating. And we're in an energetic universe, and you're here trying to hold loving energy towards him and dismantle your not so loving energy about yourself. It's not too much of a surprise. Delightful.
Yeah. Well, thanks for those mind shifters. They're both really juicy. The first ones, I'm going to start with that.
And remember this quote that comes from the Course in Miracles that Michael Ryce was talking about last Monday and Tuesday on his show. The Course said the way Michael quotes it is, and I transcribed what Michael said. I haven't found the quote in the Course in Miracles yet, but Michael quotes it as, exempt no one from your love, or you will be hiding a darkened place within your mind where the Holy Spirit's healing power is not welcome.
That's perfect.
So welcome the Holy Spirit's healing power by extending love to anyone and anything that you have been pointing your negative mind energy towards.
That's really a wonderful recipe assignment.
Well,
goal.
And there are those who would say it's the only thing that works.
Yeah.
right? By the time this is Dr. Michael Ryce is hammering away at the in depth and detail of the new expanded codependence to interdependence or power person dynamic worksheet, right? And it's so complicated and so many layers, and he draws out this, relationship substitution or whatever, image substitution. And he talks about how each of us is walking around with at least 3 different images in our mind when we're in a relationship with somebody else. An image of ourselves, an image of the other person, an image of our power person. And then we get into a relationship with somebody and they've got an image of themselves, an image of us, and an image of their power person. So like 6 different persona images flying around between my mind and this other person's mind. And when I step on their bag of garbage that's related to their power person, if I do it enough times, in other words, they interpret things I'm doing as though it's just like their power person. When that happens enough times, it flips a switch. And now, whenever they hear me or see me or think about me, they're not even really seeing their image of me. They're seeing their image of their power person superimposed on their image of me.
Mm.
And unless or until I can wake up to that and recognize that, hey, I'm the one creating this upset. I'm the one with unresolved trauma energies in me that have just gotten recruited by the goal I'm choosing to form my image of life and this person in front of me. Unless I can sort that out, I'm stuck repeating a cycle that may have been, decades or generations old in my bloodline.
Mm.
Willingness to look at that is an essential piece to the healing process. Am I willing to dive deeply into my willingness to see the truth? Am I willing to be open enough? Some people use the term vulnerable. I use the word open because as we talk in this work, your true nature can't ever be chipped, dented, rusted, faded, or broken in any way. There is no vulnerability for your essence. Consciousness can't be destroyed, can't be hurt or offended. Your sense of yourself that's derived from your thoughts and what's been programmed into you, that can feel like it's threatened and challenged, but your essence is perfectly safe in every moment. And that's why using a term like invulnerable or vulnerability doesn't really resonate for me, because if you are completely safe, if you are whole and complete, if there is truly nothing of value that can be taken from you and nothing of value that can be added unto you, then it doesn't make sense to talk about vulnerability or the ability to be hurt. It does make sense for me to talk about openness and to be wide open to what I'm thinking, wide open to what I'm feeling, wide open to the input of others, with the understanding that whatever's coming out of somebody else is all about what's going on inside of them. It's not about me. Nice deep breath. Thoughts, comments, questions, reactions, answers?
That's a good, what you were just saying about vulnerability versus openness. People talk about that being vulnerable as such a good thing, a kind of willingness to let somebody maybe invade, as if the implication at the bottom is that you are okay and you can dare to be vulnerable. But I love that idea that you're not really vulnerable if you believe. All of this has a prerequisite of having done your own work and know so much about your own well-being and okayness that you could go into any situation and you probably wouldn't have violent communication, for instance. You would know how to interact and you would assume connection with another person. Oh, wow.
What was the last part of what you said? You would assume connection with another person? What do you mean?
Yeah, assume that your intention is to connect. You wouldn't want to go into any situation where you want to prove yourself right or go into battle or prove them wrong. If you were centered and well and believing in your own safety, you would be free to only want to connect with other people, it
Yeah,
would seem.
your own safety and your own wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
completeness.
Yeah.
And again, the work is right now we're just saying words, but the work is a series of tools I can choose to pick up and apply to myself so that I have an experience, and the experience is what matters, not the words I'm using to point at the experience.
Mm.
And there are all kinds of people. I remember Stuart Wilde, in one of the books I read of his, he was a spiritual writer and teacher. And in one of the books, he said, if you start doing any work in this area and you start writing books about this or having conversations with people, it's not too long before people start coming up to you and saying, my guru is enlightened. And he said, I got so tired of people coming up to me telling me about how their guru was so enlightened. I started telling them, look, let's arrange to go to your guru's family of origin for a week. We'll live
Yeah,
there in the
right.
house for a week. And
Oh.
at the end of the week, we'll see who's enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
None of us are free of this stuff. And yet,
Yeah.
every one of us can have an experience that opens us to things beyond words, that gives us this lived experience of, what Michael Ryce calls um, active present love in every cell of your body. Well, those are just words. And yet, the experience that some people have that they have no ability to put words on is that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And people say, it was like there was no time. It was like I was connected to everything. It was like, well, it doesn't really like it wasn't. And they can't talk because
Uh-huh.
there aren't really words for this. Why? Because everything we have words for is stuff that's been programmed into us. It's like the Way of Mastery says, it's the intellect that's been
Mm.
shoved full of trivialities like garbage in a garbage can. It relates to the language we're taught, and most of us have been taught in a language that's not. Michael Ryce keeps us asserting that the ancient Aramaic was a physics language and a language of the energy, but English is not a physics language. It's a
Mm.
language of separation and
Mm.
delineation, and each word means a specific separate thing. Whereas in the ancient Aramaic, and one of these, this beautiful summary that or introduction that comes in the James version of the Beatitudes, his interpretation of the Beatitudes. He talks about how in the ancient Aramaic, words didn't have the kind of meaning that they have in our language, because in our language, there's one thing and one word for it.
Mm.
Whereas if you listen to somebody like Dale Allen Hoffman, who's a scholar of a variety of languages, including the ancient Aramaic and Greek, etc. He says, I forget how many different ways, but there are hundreds of viable, valid ways to interpret the first line of the scripture. Just the first line alone. There's like 3 or 4 paragraphs to describe what's meant by the word Bereshit, because each letter is deep and rich in meaning. Each letter can take a sentence or two to describe. And then when it's combined in different ways, and if it's landing on the ears of a different person, it has a whole different meaning. So everything about what we're saying and thinking that's able to be communicated through language is a copy of a copy. It's an image of an image. It's a symbol of a symbol. And what we're inviting people to in this work is to step into the use of practical tools and direct observation so you usher yourself into an experience of life that no one can give you and no one can truly tell you about.
Dr. Tim, you mentioned an experience you had, what, this morning? Could you tell that again?
I just had, see, this is one of those things where the words aren't really going to do it. I was walking around my kitchen. I was, doing the morning routine, and I had been listening. At the time when this hit me, I didn't have anything else going on. I was just with my thoughts. But I had been listening to, skimming through Dr. Michael Ryce's show yesterday and getting ready to have my conversation with Micah Salabarios this morning in the interview. And it just struck me at a different kind of a level that when Abraham says, Abraham Hicks, the channeled consciousness energy called Abraham. Abraham says, your most important creation in any given moment is your emotion in that moment. And I just had this kind of a full body realization that, you know what, that's the only thing I've got any control over. And it's the thing that's going to radiate out from me far more than my thoughts, far more powerfully than my thoughts. And it's my contribution to the world. And in that moment, I just had this kind of a shivering, shaking realization that people who want to start a nonprofit, people who want to end cancer, people who want to end homelessness, and that's lovely. And what's more important is, what are they feeling in the moment? What are they adding to the quantum soup? And these words aren't doing it justice, but it was just this deeper felt recognition that the more I do my reality management worksheets and EFT tapping and my breath work, the more I align myself to this awareness of my true nature as love and awareness that everyone I interact with is the same, the more I'm contributing positively to this thing we call life and creation. I'm, I'm stuck with this thought in my head about the word Bereshit, and I know that somewhere in my probably on my other computer, now that I've changed computers, I won't have access to all the stuff for a while.
How do you spell it, Dr. Tim?
Well, that's us making an English interpretation. I was trying to look it up, but that's us making an interpretation in English And so Beresheet, I think, is the way that Dale Allen Hoffman talked about it. But, you know, I have a document somewhere where I was taking notes while he was talking about this. And it's just paragraphs. It's like almost a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper about the meaning of the word Bereshit. Because each letter carries deep meanings that it might take a sentence or two or three to describe.
So that's an Aramaic word?
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of the first words from the opening of the Bible. I'll see if I can't look that up for a future show and bring it back up. And
that would be good.
It's fascinating. It's one of the reasons that I was drawn so much to Dale Allen Hoffman's work is that he has this linguistic ability and interest and passion for it. And so he's continuing, he still does this, he continues to dig in his work and question what he thinks he knows and find other resources and integrate it in a way that it's all going to make sense. So he doesn't have something that, oh, I just found something that completely blows out of the water all of these fundamental things, but it's got a hole in it. Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't go chasing after things. It's like what Dr. Michael Ryce had in the Caboris manuscript foundation, the Caboris Foundation. They decided they would do these committee type translations for what was in the oldest known copy of the New Testament, translating it directly into English. And in order for something to be included, it had to hold together. It had to be, number one, it had to be a valid literal translation of the word. And then it also had to be compatible with this whole loving message of all of the other work that was attributed to Yeshua. And Dale Allen Hoffman, I believe he does the same kind of thing. He says, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to open up to this stuff and find as much as I can about learning. Oh, I just found it. Only got a couple of minutes here, but let's see if this opens up. You get an idea. Bereshit, the first word of the Torah. He says there are possible translations for the first line of the Torah, 913 valid translations, clear and distinct ways that you can interpret the first line of the Torah, 913 ways that are all valid. And then he talks about the word Bereshit. And Bereshit starts with the word or the letter Beit, which means house. And it actually looks like a house or an upside down U with sharp corners. Bereshit, house. Burst open as its own blessing from inside to outside. Resh, the R sound, means head, source, or leading edge. Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew and the Aramaic alphabet, is put in words to keep the word in motion. This Aleph sound is to keep it in motion. So this is the word Bereshit is a word about activity and motion. It's meant so my note here says it means ox or something whose strength is in its wholeness, right? Strength only comes when we are aware of our whole self. Shin or shine, that SH sound, means to express and shine forth. And it looks like a lip with teeth underneath it. Yod or hand means to reach out. Everything you see is God. Everything is God. And then reshit, as two sounds put together, means a woven net that a fisherman would use. Reshi at the beginning of the word, at this edge of the rushing waters. So he says, here's a way you might interpret the word Bereshit. You are surfing the leading edge of the cosmos. Have you ever had that feeling when you're so fully, wholly present right now in this moment at your center that you feel as if you're at the leading edge of all creation? That is what it means to be born again. So this is an expanding fire bursting open as its own blessing from the head or the leading edge of everything to shine and express and reach out to become its own reflection.
Mm.
That's one of many, many
Wow.
ways to interpret the first word of the Bible.
Well,
And so you might think that your words, the way we talk about them in English and when we have these meanings all nailed down, you might begin to understand how limiting that is. And we're
mhm.
not trying to tell people what their words mean. We're trying to offer people tools that they can use to usher themselves into a different level of experience in their life. And one that we hope they will understand is more loving and compassionate than anything they'll get from their English language experience. So I realize we've run over time. I thank you all for being here. Michael might any moment start another hour on needle.
Needle.
And I thank you for being here. There's a support group tonight if you're interested. Mindshiftersacademy.org is the place to find out about it. It's all free. And I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love.